Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. For the last 10 years, today's guest has been actively writing about Burning Man culture and engaging with Burning Man at the cutting edge of its philosophy, composing over 250 articles for the Burning Man website. By 2015, this work had made him, outside of Larry Harvey and his fellow founders, one of the leading interpreters of Burning Man within its own culture. In 2015, Larry Harvey asked him, along with Burning Man's Director of Education, Stuart Mangrum, to sit on the philosophical center of the Burning Man nonprofit. He is the author of the new book, The Scene That Became Cities, What Burning Man Philosophy Can Teach About Building Better Communities. Welcome to the show, Caveat Magister, a.k.a. Benjamin Wax.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the show. Let's start with a little bit about your background, but also where are you right now?
I am actually in a corner tucked away media room at Burning Man headquarters in San Francisco. This is entirely coincidence. I'd planned to do your show at home and then realized I had to be running around, and I thought, shoot, where am I going to find a quiet Wi-Fi enabled space that I can do this? Oh, I'll just go to Burning Man headquarters. There we go. So that's where I am right now. Unfortunately for you and your viewers, I'm in the most boring room at the Burning Man headquarters. It is a weirdly gorgeous art-infested space filled with strange and whimsical things, and you're not getting any of that right now. You're getting a checkered background behind me, but it is a visually stunning and weird place to be, yeah, so sorry about that.
No, well, I'm super happy to have you on the show. I think that your book is really important. I can't wait to read it. I think, I've been to Burning Man 5 times, and as we discussed before we started the show, unfortunately, I had to miss this year, but for an amazing reason. It was the birth of my daughter. I think the only acceptable reason, and I have an amazing photo behind me. This was taken this year by Jacob Riglin. I think that's how I pronounce his name. I just want to give him a shout out because it looks super cool. But this is Burn Night. And, Burning Man, for people who don't go, it's kind of hard to understand. And there's a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of curiosity, and there's a lot of misinformation, and there's a lot of stuff that goes around Burning Man because it's become worldwide now. Everybody kind of knows about it. They've heard about it. They're trying to understand it. But like something like this, I feel like it needs to be experienced. So before I go off and how I feel about it, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are, how you got to where you are today, and what inspired you to write your book?
Well, you covered the basics. I started out volunteering for Burning Man as the volunteer coordinator for their media team, and because I was talking with media volunteers and on various email lists, the communications department there decided that they really liked my voice when I talked about Burning Man issues, and they asked me to write for their website. And this wasn't so unusual for me. I was a journalist for a long time, newspaper columnist, and done that sort of thing, a lot of writing. So it was certainly something that I was able to do. But I told them no. I said no, I'm not going to do that. And the woman who managed the communications team at the time, Action Girl, said, well, let's have a conversation about that. Let's sit down and have a cup of coffee. And talk about this? And I said, sure. I love you, so let's do that. So we sat down, we had a cup of coffee. She said, okay, I'm really surprised. Why don't you want to write for our website? I thought that's something you'd want to do. And I said, because no offense, but I've seen what's on your website. I've seen what you're doing, and it's all fine. It's all perfectly good, but it's not what I would want to do. I would want to ask really challenging questions, really open-ended questions about what the culture is, where it goes, what it does, how it works, and go in not knowing the answers and take whatever comes, figure it out as I go, instead of having a clear, here's the points that I have to hit and what I have to say. And there's no organization in the world that would just let me do that on their website. So, let's not ruin the perfectly good thing we have by pretending that, I'm going to be able to do that. And she looks at me and she says, no, that's exactly what I want you to do. That's why I'm asking you to do this. I'm counting on you to do this. So will you do it for us? And I said, I know you think that's what you want. I know you think that, but you don't really mean it. Okay, we'd go 6 weeks before somebody would say, "What's he doing? You can't just write that on our website. You've got to take him down." So let's not ruin a good relationship that we have by doing this. And she said, "Okay, look, here's how serious I am. I'm just going to give you publishing credentials on our website. Okay, you can just write whatever you want and publish it yourself. No editing, no review process, no pitching. You just write what you need to write and publish it, and that's what'll happen. That's how serious I am. Now will you do this?" And I said, "Well, I guess if you feel that strongly about it, if that's actually what will happen, then okay, I will. We'll give this a try. We'll try it. I don't think it'll last 6 months, but we'll give it a try." So here we are, about 13 years later, and that's what I have been doing ever since. And they've been as good as their word, and mostly. But yes, I have basically been able to say whatever I want without review the whole time, and the ability to do that and do it to people say, well, really enabled me to help understand the culture better and help the culture understand itself better. And a couple of years after that, Larry Harvey, the primary founder of Burning Man, reached out to me and said that he really admired my work and wanted to talk with me about it. And so we connected and we became very close friends. And he asked me to sit on the Burning Man Project's Philosophical Center. As Burning Man moved from an LLC to a nonprofit, it had the idea of a philosophical center written into its bylaws, that this would actually be an active thing that it does in order to understand itself, explore new areas of the culture. And so Larry, myself, and Stuart became the Philosophical Center in 2015, and I continued doing that work with them at that point. In 2016, I also became the lead writer and researcher for their education program and helped write a course for Burning Man on Burning Man culture and history. And then in 2018, I was offered by North Atlantic Books the opportunity to write a book on Burning Man culture, on Burning Man philosophy. They said, we really admire your work. We think this time has come. Would this be good? Will you do this? And they offered it to me just as Larry had his stroke, which he had in 2018. And so I basically started writing the book a couple of weeks after he died, which was something that I had never imagined I would have to do. The idea of writing something like this without him, sort of looking over my shoulder and talking about it with him, and it being that collaborative process had never even occurred to me. But so I spent most of 2018 writing the book, and then when it was finished, I'll be perfectly honest, I was one step ahead of a breakdown. And so I quit everything and went and traveled some, and I'm coming back from that now that the book is published and out. But that's sort of the history of it and where I came from with this.
Amazing, man. Well, thanks for sharing all that. Yeah, and unfortunately, Larry Harvey passed sometime last year, right? Like last year was when everybody was celebrating his life, and there's all the things up there for a very interesting human. I learned a lot more about him as all these articles were coming up. So maybe you can speak on that a little bit if you wish, because it looks like you wanted to jump in. You would know him personally, so I'd love to hear a little bit.
Larry was a fascinating, brilliant, and sometimes very difficult person. I like to say that it took a profoundly alienated man to create a community like this. He was adopted. He was an orphan. He grew up with a close family, but also with a sense of deep isolation. And in many ways, much of his life's work became bringing people together in new forms of community, creating better ways for us to relate to one another. And I mean, Larry would often joke, we certainly talk about this with each other, that, if Burning Man weren't radically inclusive, neither of us would have ever been invited to go. He said I I had to create this in order to get invited, and I had a similar story. He was not a hipster. He was not a member of an avant-garde art movement. He was a landscaper. He spent a lot of time working on people's yards. He briefly served in the military. He belonged to a group of people in San Francisco in the 80s who we called the latte carpenters, because they were blue collar guys who would sit around and also talk about philosophy over coffee. And that's the milieu out of which he came. And he didn't really have a formal education. He was an autodidact. He read everything himself, but he was also one of the most brilliant men I've ever met, and incredibly playful. His sense of humor is one of the things that is most often lost in discussions about Larry. He did not see himself as any kind of spiritual leader. He saw himself as a guy who had an idea and who was good at creating the conditions under which communities can flourish. And that's what it was.
I appreciate you sharing that. And maybe you can go into a little bit of Burning Man history, just a very quick one, because I know some people listening to this are very familiar with Burning Man. Some people have no idea what it is. So maybe you can give like a little bit of, just an overview where it came from and like kind of what it is today.
Well, I mean, the basics are that Larry and his friend Jerry James, so Larry and Jerry and their families got the idea to build a life-size wooden man on Baker Beach in San Francisco and burn it. And Larry had the idea. Jerry was a carpenter, and so he actually did most of the making of the thing. They used a lot of found wood for it. The guy was 8 feet tall. The story is that he also had a little dog that the kids made, so there was actually a burning dog on the first one. And it was kind of a couple of families having a sort of an art picnic on the beach was what it started out as. But when they lit it on fire, it was incandescent, and a crowd of 30-some people just all came together suddenly. They just came over on the beach, and there was this realization that something had happened, that this act of creating a piece of art and offering it up to anyone who was there, no charge, no admission fee, no velvet rope, and then lighting it on fire and just being present in that moment had an impact on people, had created a momentary community of strangers. And so they decided to do it again, and it got bigger, and they decided to do it again, and it got bigger. And at that point, it came to the attention of a legendary group of San Francisco pranksters. I think you could maybe call them art pranksters, although I don't know that they ever thought of themselves as artists, but called the Cacophony Society. And these were people who really enjoyed doing, again, I think public art pranks is the best way to think of them. There's a race in San Francisco called Bay to Breakers, in which people go from the San Francisco Bay and they race all the way to the ocean. And the Cacophony Society, one of the things they did was they would dress in salmon costumes and they would run upstream against the race. Things like that. They started SantaCon. They started around Christmas, all dressing up as Santas and going from bar to bar. They did these kinds of things, and they saw what was going on with Larry and Jerry on Baker Beach, and they offered to help, and it continued to grow. And then when I think in 1990, when the San Francisco authorities finally said, yeah, you can't do that, you don't have permits, you have to shut it down, they went and they took it to the Black Rock Desert in Nevada. And it was a Cacophony Society event then that was happening in the Black Rock Desert in Nevada, and they built the man there and they burned it. And everybody just realized when they did this is amazing. This combination of elements, this art project in this blank open space is something incredibly special, incredibly difficult, but incredibly special. And it just started to grow and grow and grow from there until it was more or less doubling in size every year at that point. And suddenly by 1996, you had 10,000, 15,000 people, and people were going, who are all these people? Where do they come from? And at that point, it needed some more organization, and so an organization was made to provide infrastructure and work with the authorities, because at that point it was again coming to the attention of authorities, and they started. It turned into what it was, which was the creation of a city. It was not a city when people went out there, Black Rock City, but they kept on adding more and more amenities. And somebody got the idea of doing a post office, and somebody wanted to create a newspaper. And of course, there were lots of bars. And so suddenly an informal city was being created. And then out of that joke, a formal city emerged. And suddenly it was a real thing. And it just kept on happening and happening. And eventually it became a nonprofit in 2013. And here it is today.
That's amazing. Well, yeah, it is a real city. It's funny because my first year, how I got there is a very long story. I'm going to skip it, but the long and short of it is I had a week to prepare, and I knew how much of a pain in the butt was. And I had an amazing camp. Shout out Genital Portrait Studios for my first one. I was like, oh my goodness, guys, what an idea! But it was like a shocker. But to get in, I couldn't figure out how to get in, and I actually ended up taking a small plane from Canada, a very small one, and flew in. And there's an official airport that is built there, and I was coming in from the sky. And seeing the line of cars. You're never going to forget your first year. It's just something like that needs to be experienced. It's so mind blowing. I don't think I shut up about it for probably 4 months. Totally necessary to have the decompression parties and the amazing people and connections and things and the beautiful experiences that you have there are really, really incredible. So I don't want to get sidetracked on my own excitement about Burning Man just yet, but can you talk a little bit about your book? You're talking about the philosophy and community, and that for me is such a big element of what Burning Man is to me. When people see it, they talk about a lot of the negative things, and there are some negative things. It's true. There's a lot of stuff that's not perfect. There's a huge 70,000 people. Some people come for different reasons that might not be in alignment with the 10 principles, but there are guidelines. There are amazing things in place. There are opportunities to make lifelong connections, lifelong friends, and absolutely incredible conversations and open-heartedness. There's so much beauty that I experience every year. Maybe it's because it's my intention and my hope and where I go, but it can be anything that you want it to be, really, at the end of the day. So can you speak a little bit about your book and some of the philosophy and some of the things that you think Burning Man can offer the world?
Yeah, all right. Burning Man philosophy. Let's talk about that. The fact that Burning Man has a fairly developed philosophy is one of the many things that separates it out from, say, music festivals or events like that. But a lot of people hear philosophy and they get the wrong idea. They think of it as being some sort of blueprint for how you create something like this, and that isn't it at all. Let's before we talk about what it is, let's talk about where it comes from. So, okay. Burning Man did not start because somebody had a philosophy and they were trying to bring the philosophy to life, right? It was a family picnic. It was two guys, one of whom had the idea, hey, let's build a wooden man on the beach and burn it. That wasn't a philosophical statement, right? There wasn't a plan there. There wasn't some, complicated document that they were following. They just wanted to have an experience. And that's one of the things you have to realize about Burning Man, which is that the experience always comes first. As I say in the book, and we'll get to the book, but as I say there a lot, the fundamental unit of meaning at Burning Man isn't abstract thought or language or reasoning. It's what you do. It's action. So Burning Man started with action. It started with two guys creating art in a public space and letting anybody come. That's what it started with. And the question that Larry was probably asked most in his life was, what does it mean? What did it mean? What does it symbolize? And he never answered that. Occasionally he did, but he'd give contradictory answers. He never came up with this is what it means, this is what it's supposed to mean, this is what you're supposed to think about when you're doing it. Again, that was never part of it. That was never part of what happened. You don't have a received meaning that you have to say, this is what this is how I should experience it. Again, the experience comes first, the action comes first. So for the first many years of Burning Man, that was all there was. It was a thing they did. There wasn't an explanation. There wasn't a doctrine. There wasn't a philosophy. There wasn't anything like that. And it just emerged organically, right? It wasn't, again, that somebody said, oh, we're in the desert now. We should create a city because that is a rational thing to do. It just happened. People just started to do it. And once they saw that it was doing it, people started to go, oh, I want to do that too. And they all started to play at that. It wasn't until 2004 that Burning Man took its first major step into what we could now consider Burning Man philosophy, right? So that's 1986 to 2004, and there's no particular philosophy happening. Or what's happening is experienced, it's lived. It's not a philosophy that you read about, it's a philosophy you live. That's growing organically. The people doing it are the people making it. 2004, something changed. What changed? Okay, well, by 1997, 98, definitely by 99, Burning Man started to develop what's called the regional network, now the global network, where people were coming in from all across the country and even the world, and some of them were leaving going, I want to do this at home. I want to do some version of this at home. And in fact, in 97, 98, the first regional took place outside of, I believe, Austin, Texas, when somebody did it, just to do it. We're having a Burning Man event. We're doing it ourselves. We're doing it locally. And why couldn't they do that, right? Of course they could do it. It's not like there's anything proprietary about building a effigy and burning it while you're all camping, right? I mean, that's, there's no reason not to. The Burning Man organization said, sure, that'd be great. And then this started to pop up. This started to happen. And by 2004, you had regional groups, relatively small, but still real, across the United States and in some parts of Europe. And then they went to the Burning Man organization in 2004 and said, we're having a really hard time explaining what we're doing to people in our communities, right? We're really having a hard time talking about this because it is a thing you have to experience to get, but we need to talk to people about this, right? We need to be able to tell people where we live, why we're doing this and what it's supposed to be about and how it works. Can you help us with that? Please, can you help us figure this out? What do we say? And that's where things got really interesting, because think about this. You have what is right now an LLC with a movement that has been described as the New American Holiday, an event that has been described as the New American Holiday. Wired magazine described it as that way back in 1996. And their network of global volunteers is asking them, hey, can you explain what we're doing? Most people at that point, most organizations would publish a book, or they'd have Larry give a big speech and then they'd refer people to the speech, or they'd publish a white paper, right? They do something like that. That is not what happened. Instead, what happened was that Larry wrote out 10 principles to explain what Burning Man was. And they're under 500 words, all told. They're it's amazingly concise. And they're not prescriptive. They're descriptive. They don't say, you should do this. They say, this is what we value. And where did they come from? Where did these 10 principles come from? It wasn't a blueprint. It wasn't Larry going, well, this is how I think it should work. This is what I think is good in the world. This is what I want to encourage. It was Larry saying, when I look at our community, what are we actually doing? When this thing works, when it has the impact it has that we want it to have, what's going on? So he took what the culture had built organically and described it. He didn't say, this is what you have to do. He said, this is what we did to get here, and this is how it works now that we're here. And so you have 10 principles. And that's what he sent to the regional network, and that's what was published. And the 10 principles, let's see if I can remember them all, are radical inclusion, radical self-expression, radical self-reliance, decommodification, gifting, participation, communal effort, civic responsibility, leaving no trace, and immediacy. 10 principles. Right? When we laugh, but actually the truth is that most burners cannot name all 10. In fact, if you were to go to people in this building, in Burning Man headquarters, and do a flash quiz and say, all right, what are the 10 principles? A lot of people would get maybe 6 or 7.
Yeah, it's impressive. I had the website up just because I knew we were going to talk about it. So I was scrolling through as you're saying, I was like, nice work.
You were prepared. Thank you. But so those are the 10 principles. And again, those aren't prescriptions. Those aren't, this is what you have to do. And nowhere in there is this is how you leave no trace, or this is how you express yourself. It's a statement that these are the things we value. This is what we do. And when we do it, Burning Man happens. So suddenly you have this advancement. Suddenly we have the 10 principles. And that's where Burning Man philosophy as a written thing, as an idea, as an abstract notion starts to emerge. But that's also pretty much where they left it. Much in the same way that Larry didn't say, this is what the man means, I burn it, and it symbolizes this. He left that open. He left that for you to figure out. You decide. The action's the important thing. The same thing, they didn't then go and do a whole big 10 principles thing or expand on it, or, they just left it. They kept it. It's literally the minimum he could do to be helpful while saying as little as possible. That's pretty much it. And it worked. Amazingly, considering how contentious burners can be about things, people pretty much looked at it and went, oh yeah, that seems to work, and accepted it. And so the culture continued to grow, and the event continued to grow, and the regional network became the global network, and it continued to grow. And then you reached a point around 2013, 2014, where what had been, Burning Man started out as an experiment, right? It started out as a couple guys and their families going, I wonder if we could build a man on the beach and burn him. And, oh, it looks like we can. Let's try it again. And then, again. So it started out as an experiment. Then they moved to the desert, and it became a frontier. It was quite literally the Wild West. It was quite literally a frontier town for all these years. But it became a city, and it kept growing. And then it had a regional network and a global network. And that's where it became a culture. It had this very organic growth from an experiment to a frontier to a culture, and it kept growing. And now it's in what I call its high culture phase, where it's this global emergent culture. And those things have different needs, right? The needs and opportunities of an experiment are different from the needs and opportunities of a frontier. And the needs and opportunities of a culture are different from the needs and opportunities of a frontier. Now you've reached this point where Burning Man is a global phenomenon. It's a global culture. And much in the same way that the 10 principles emerged out of people saying, we need to talk about this. How can we do it? We're at this point where people are talking about it so much, and so many people are being introduced to the culture through these discussions and these dialogues. This used to be a culture where people accessed it by being part of it, right? You went, and that's how you learned what it was. Now, a whole lot more people think they know what it is because they're reading something about it. They're part of a discussion that has nothing to do with it. So the time had come, I felt, and Larry agreed, that we needed to do more. That's why Larry started the Philosophical Center. And that's where the book comes from, because it's not that Burning Man philosophy is a blueprint. It's not that it's going to tell you, here's what you have to do, here's how you organize something, here's what here's the right and true thing that you should be part of. But what it does do is it says, let's look at what's actually going on. Let's describe this as accurately as possible and make it as accessible as possible and see what inspires us. That's what Burning Man philosophy is for. That's what it does. Not to give you the right answers, but to be helpful in your pursuit of your own personal passion and engagement. That's what Burning Man philosophy is for. And the time had come, we felt, to write a book, because the community is so much bigger now. It's a global phenomenon. People are going to talk about it anyway, so we might as well help them talk about it as well as we possibly can. But action is still the basic unit of meaning.
That's amazing. Just listening to all that is giving me so much more background and clarity. And I love the way that you are phrasing that the action is the basic unit, and immediacy, and going through the principles, and how you're sharing that it's not a blueprint. This isn't a must. These are just things that we are observing from what is happening. It's
right.
Almost out of control from the beginning, watching the people, watching the community engage in an experience and observe what is working and what is creating that experience and what is creating positive impact in all these relationships and these beautiful experiences, and growing like that, and leaving as much room to your own interpretations as possible. Because what he could have done, like you were saying there, I just imagined, like, at that point, it could have been a huge turning point for Burning Man, where he comes up and, he gets maybe full of ego, and he's like, oh, I've created this, and now here's my philosophy, right? You start a whole religion out of it. It could be
Yeah.
whatever you'd want to call it. And then you start steering the boat. But it seemed like you phrased it perfectly, just the minimum dose of, this is all the direction you need. Keep going. Let it continue to emerge. Let it flower naturally. Let it just be experienced. And I totally agree that Burning Man is something that needs to experience, because as accurately as I can portray it, or as much enthusiasm or whatever, you just can't get it. You just got to go. Even people, I remember like my third year, people had lived in San Francisco and heard about it over and over and over again. And they're there on Wednesday, we're on an art car, and they're just like, I've heard about this, but oh my God, like what is happening? And
Yeah.
I also like what you said at the beginning, where you said that, you and Larry may not have been invited to create something that you just got invited to. And I think that's a really beautiful part too, because I've met so many amazing people there, young, old, all different walks of life, all different experiences in the world, retired, all these different things.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, it takes those boundaries away. That's one of the things I really like, is that there's no, like when you're going around your normal neighborhood and you're going to your local bars and you're having your local experiences, you have the same experiences, you have the same conversations, and your guard is up. But when you go to a place where you like, there's nothing is grounded, everything is so fresh, and it's so fresh for that next person. So you don't go in and you don't like connect on any kind of preconceived notion. You're experiencing something that you're both processing together, and it connects you, and it's wonderful. And it's not so important where they came from, what they do for work. And then the higher quality conversations and connections immediately happen just because of that experience and that openness. You're not worried and you're not guarded. So the way that it's crafted is beautiful.
Yeah, no, I tell people, people ask me, why do you keep going back to Burning Man? And one of the things I say is that it's because in my life, as in most of our lives, we pretty much know what's going to happen day to day, week to week, month to month, right? I mean, we never know exactly. We have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. Burning Man events, Burning Man spaces, Black Rock City, this is a place where I don't know what's going to happen when I cross the street. I have no idea. It could be anything. It's amazing. And that creates so much opportunity. And like you said, it's not at all about doing what we tell you to do or we want you to do. It's about figuring out what you want to do. One of the things that I talk about in the book is what I call applied existentialism, right? It's this notion that, and you probably had this experience, I've had this experience, I think pretty much everybody has this experience when they first go out there. You're in a place where your money is basically no good here, where there is no winning, there is no rat race, there's no way to keep score or status in the way that we usually do it. You've got this week of time where you can't do the things that you normally do just to get ahead in life. And so you suddenly have to ask yourself, what do I actually want to do? And it could be anything, because there really aren't limits there. You want to start a newspaper? Sure. You want to run a naked marathon? Sure. You want to cook bacon and potato pancakes and make a cart and roll it around. You want to start a hall of mirrors. I mean, what do you want to do? It could be anything. What do you actually care about doing for its own sake? And that question kind of freaks people out for a while. You really have to confront this question. What do I actually care about? What do I want to do? But once you find that, suddenly that doesn't just change your experience, that changes your life. That's profound, but it's not from doing what we want you to do. It's from us helping you do what you want to do. And it's completely different.
Yeah, 100%. And the way that the mind works, really just basic psychology, is that when we're stuck in one pattern, it's really hard to imagine anything else. And so what it does nicely for you is just break all of those patterns and everything that you can think of, and anything that you put in a tiny box, because that box is always changing every second. So your brain is like, okay, never mind. You can't label anything. Like the way we process things, we're just labeling things as we go around so we understand them. And you'll see like a banana riding a bike, and then you'll see, what I mean, something else ridiculous. And as you try to label all these different things, it just becomes absurd very quickly. And so you allow yourself to emerge in the experience, and people start talking about things that are more important to them. They start to talk about a little bit more upbeat things. What is it that you want? And understanding that if you can create it here, all that effort, I was so shocked at like the amount of effort that went in for 1 week. I was like, what? Why would you do that? And I feel like it also is a testament to what is possible when people work together, whether it's a small camp and you've gone for your first year and you just manage getting there and you survive, or you've been there for a few years and you're offering really amazing gifts for people. And, I've seen so many people at different camps just offer so much, work so hard all year. And then when they're there, they're working the whole time because you're creating a container for somebody to have an experience that's going to help them grow as an individual far beyond maybe what therapy would do for years or something else, because the environment is doing that for them. The people and everything it engages is doing that for them.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And it is very psychologically powerful. I mean, people talk about transformative experiences all the time to the point where it's a cliche. And there's an element of this I don't like, because I think that the more we talk about transformative experiences and the transformative experiences people have out there, the more it becomes assumed that if you don't have a transformative experience, something's gone wrong. That this is a thing you do and you have it and you go and you're transformed and it's not like that at all. But I really don't like the notion that we're sort of promising people transformative experiences, both because I don't think that's helpful and because I think it takes the onus off of people to do the work themselves, right? It's not like you go and somebody sprinkles fairy dust on you and you're transformed. You're going to have, I tell people really accurately, and this is actually something that I talk about in the book a lot, that, you get depressed at Burning Man. This is not a safe space. I say Burning Man is not a safe space. We take your risks and we lubricate them. We make it easy for you to take risks and easy for you to recover from them, but they are risks. It's real. This is not a benign environment. The things that happen there have consequences. You can fail. You can fail badly. It says on the ticket, you assume the risk of death. You may very well die. The ticket never says, and you'll have a great time. This is important, but so it's not like something automatically happens. You will have these experiences and you have to do the work. And I am guaranteed at least 2 major existential crises for every week I'm at Burning Man. That's a given. That's just a thing that happens. No matter how many years I go, I'm still going to have them. This year, I had a bunch this year. It was an amazing experience. But so many people out there get lonely and depressed and miserable. I mean, I think the most useful thing I ever wrote about Burning Man is called "It's Okay to Be Miserable at Burning Man." But it does have a transformative effect on people. This is a real thing that happens. It is so psychologically potent, and it's this amazing combination of art and play and ritual all happening in this space where you are encouraged. Not only are you encouraged to pursue your intrinsic passion, right? Applied existentialism. What do you really want to do? But everyone around you is doing that same thing. And it turns out that when people are all pursuing their real passions, their intrinsic passions, environments get really potent and powerful and interesting and amazing things happen. And it has a deep effect. It affects us all very deeply. That is a real and profound thing. And it is very hard to explain outside of that, but it happens. It's not an automatic, happy, transformative experience, but it's real.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm glad you shared that, because one of the fascinating things I discovered at one of my Burning Mans is I was sitting there in my tent and I was like, how is it that I have never felt this lonely before? I had a great camp. I had great friends, and I'm just like, how am I feeling this this epic loneliness right now? And it really takes you through the gauntlet. And a lot of people go there, they have really terrible experiences, and that happens to a great degree. And many of the people who have those experiences, it actually ends up helping them in a way, in some way. They get an insight, whatever happens, whatever that experience gave them. Some people will say, Burning Man doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you need. And you hear all these sayings when you're there and all these different experiences, and things like playa magic. I 100% agree that that's a thing. And I was trying to figure out why that happens, because everybody has an experience with that, and for people who don't know, it's just a synchronicity that is only for you, and it just happens way too many times. It's way too random to just be chance, but it's happening over and over. So what is happening there? And I interviewed Roger Nelson and Dean Radin, who was actually doing the tests with the random number generators or the balls, to see if there was a group coherence at Burning Man. And that's where I'm really interested in, like, is there a group connection? Is there a consciousness that is like at play? Can people, what happens when so many people can be singular minded, are focused on one ideal. Now, not everybody is probably on the same page, but those guidelines do connect us in a way where it's more often than not, you're going to be connecting with somebody who is a part of those guidelines. And that makes it a safer space, and that makes it more open. That makes human beings be able to connect at a deeper level, because out in the world, it's a scary place. You know, go ahead.
This is one of the really important things about Burning Man and about what it has to teach us about culture and communities. This really is sort of the thesis of the book. This is the book, by the way, The Scene That Became Cities. And like I say, its subtitle is what Burning Man philosophy can teach us about building better communities. And in a nutshell, what we see happening is this, that we think that there is a conflict between individuals pursuing their passions and the need of society, right? We assume that those two things are in conflict. And in times of scarcity and, where everyone is constantly fighting famine, maybe that's true. But we live in a world of superabundance, right? And in a world like that, it turns out that when people discover and pursue their intrinsic motivations, their deep passions, it doesn't separate them from the larger community. It connects them to it. If that community is receptive, if that community is helpful, it connects them to it. Because here's the thing. When we are acting on the basis of extrinsic motivations, when you're doing something for a paycheck, when you're doing something because you're forced to, because you need to do it to live, it's actually alienating. It pushes you away from other people and from larger connection, because what you are practicing are the skills of doing something because you have to and nothing more. But when you are pursuing your passion, when you are pursuing your intrinsic motivation, when you are doing what you love, you are learning to care. You are learning to connect and to engage with something larger than yourself. And the skills that produces in you, the habits of mind, then help you connect with others who are doing the same thing. And eventually you start to support each other, because it turns out that when we can do whatever we want, when we have this opportunity for applied existentialism, and we can do whatever we want, eventually what we want to do is build communities. Eventually what we want to do is connect with other people. And the more you practice doing what matters to you, the better you are able to do that. It turns out that doing what you love is practice for loving. And that's what we learn. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Super well put. And what it made me think about is just the idea from, living in the world from competition to collaboration. And Burning Man is so much about collaboration. And one of the thought experiments I share on the podcast a lot of time is the idea of what it would be like for Team Earth. If you had a UFO up and the aliens are looking down and they're looking at the human race, it's just like, oh my goodness, this is chaotic. And if they had like the Olympics out in the universe of all these different races and looking at different civilizations and how they connect, well, we're not working together. We're not even at a D. We're still killing each other. We're letting people starve to death. We have a lot of issues here. And what is required is some understanding. What is required is a little bit more collaboration. What is required is a little bit more tolerance, a little bit more kindness, a little bit more action. And Burning Man is embodying those principles. So when you're there, you meet somebody from, Europe, China, Asia, Canada, whatever, all different walks of life. And none of that is really relevant other than your curiosity about their way of life.
Right.
And all these camps mixing together, and you want to collaborate more, you want to help more, you want to bring this out into your communities and feel that. And people have, a real tough time with decompression, and is that what it's called? I forget now, man. Year out of, and you're just depressed because you're in just this loving, open environment, for the most part. There's some stuff, but you're in this welcoming community, and now you're a little bit alienated. And you don't have one spot or two spots or three spots to go to, and you feel sad, real sad. And so how can we bring some of these principles of global collaboration and cooperation on one scale, and then also communal, because we're having to do that anyway. Living in Canada, we're one of the most multicultural countries in the world, Toronto especially, and we're learning to do that. We're melting all these different cultures together without killing each other. Again, for the most part, we're doing pretty good. It's not 100%, but we need to do that on a bigger scale and take down these invisible borders and these nationalities and all these different things. And the people, it just shows you that people don't want this generally. It's something else. Like, people want to collaborate. They want to be kind. They want to know about the other person. They want to build together. And it's a beautiful example of that in real life.
Yeah. No, I like to say Burning Man is a prototype. It's, it's only for a week a year. But then again, there are also, regional events happening all over the world. There are we're in countries around the globe, and so it's replicable. It happens, but it's a short period, so it's a prototype. But it is a prototype. It's a demonstration that other ways of connecting, other ways of organizing society actually are possible and feasible and replicable. And that's important. There's still a lot of work to be done. It's not, it's not a perfect system. It's certainly not a blueprint. Again, everything I've said is, this is not a blueprint. This is not if you just follow these steps and this will work out. No, you don't, creating that kind of society is about not following those steps. It's about the people really there figuring out what is important to them and finding ways to support one another in doing it. And that doesn't lend itself to a top-down blueprint. It's not like we have a formula for a utopian society. I think Burning Man is actually anti-utopian in a sense. We're not promising that things will be perfect, just that they can be better. We can do better than this. But you're absolutely right. People who have this experience want this experience in their life. It turns out that when you are in an environment surrounded by people who are supportive of whatever your unique and idiosyncratic passion is, that makes a difference. That changes you. And you want more of that. No, we've demonstrated that. We've proven that.
Yeah. And a lot of these things are really basic principles, because if you just think about a person's day-to-day life and maybe what they really want to do, what their real passion is, right? What do you want? And me at Burning Man, a lot of those conversations are just getting to know people and just figuring out, who are you? What is it that you want to do? What are you doing in the outside world? Are you happy? What would you like to do in the outside world? How would you shift things? And just asking those questions, it was surprising to me how few people actually ever even ask themselves that question. What do I want to do with my life? This is my experience. You know what I mean? And you have the power. You are capable. It might not be an easy road. You might fail. You're probably going to fail, but it doesn't mean that you cannot succeed eventually. You will succeed. And most people don't have a surrounding network of people that are actually encouraging them. We live mostly with a little bit of a crab in the bucket syndrome. People want to keep you safe. So if you go outside the box and you pursue what you're passionate about, you could fail, and then, and then the world comes down, or maybe they don't want you to succeed, whatever the case may be. But just being around people that want to hear you, that are actually listening, and then are giving you feedback on the idea and supporting you. And if we could cultivate that within our communities, that would be super beautiful. And it's great that people out there that are friends and family members and doing things in the real world to support people with those initiatives. That's a really beautiful thing. It's a very empowering thing. And it's not a common thing that we get in the day-to-day world. So I wanted to ask it, can you share some of your other ideas or principles or observations of what do you think Burning Man can offer communities or countries, whether it's at a small level for an individual to apply or at bigger levels or national levels? What have you observed that can help?
Right. Well, I think, like I said, the first thing and the most important thing is the dynamic that I was pointing out earlier, that we often think that the individuals pursuing their intrinsic passions is contrary to the needs of the social order. And the first thing to realize is that this is not the case, that the more people are motivated by intrinsic motivation, by genuine passion, the more they are given the opportunity to do what they love, the more connected they tend to be to the broader society. So that's the first thing that I think that Burning Man has to offer. That is the most important thing, the realization that no, these two things go together, that people following their intrinsic passions, their innate motivations, actually strengthens the whole. And if the whole then goes back and supports them, then you have a virtuous cycle. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing is that we need to give up, and one of the things that is implied by that is that we need to give up a level of control over what people are doing, that we have to actually let them make meaningful choices, and make sure that they are offered that, because when you have a system in which people have limited ability to make choices, their intrinsic motivation is tamped down. So we need to give people more opportunities to follow and pursue that. And this then comes to something that's really difficult. Everything I've just said, people can be like, oh, sure, okay, that makes sense. This then implies something that is a lot harder for people to swallow, which is that fairly often we need to take efficiency off the table. What do I mean by that? Well, we live in a world that is hyper obsessed with efficiency, right? I mean, all the tech companies are there to, create minuscule improvements in day-to-day life that makes it frictionless and seamless and creates slight improvements and efficiencies. Our offices, our workplaces are obsessed with efficiency. The idea that, having a little breathing room is stealing time from the company. I mean, we're obsessed with efficiency across every metric. That is a mindset in which people cannot pursue their individual passions. On the contrary, an efficiency mindset is one that is basically telling you submit. Even when you're on the receiving end of it, it is streamlining your experience in a way that takes the possibility out. Remember what I was talking about before about how at Black Rock City, in a Burning Man environment, I don't know what's going to happen next when I cross the street, and it's amazing. Efficiency mindsets take that possibility away. And it turns out that does a tremendous amount of damage. And people will respond, oh, well, efficiency is so important. Otherwise, you have all these bad processes and these inefficient things. But has that actually been the way it's gone? Our world is so much more efficient now, but are we in fact happier with it? Are we in fact more pleased with the results that we get? One of the things that I think Burning Man proves as a demonstration of an alternative means of doing things, I call it efficiency third. There's an old saying that Burning Man is a safety third environment. I think Burning Man is very much an efficiency third environment as well, is that when you get a bunch of people who are really getting together because they're passionate about doing something and they're more concerned with how it results than with making it efficient, your results are often just as good or better than they are when you're pursuing an efficiency mindset. And this is something I talk a lot about in the book. There's a lot more demonstration of this there. But it turns out that when you pursue efficiency for its own sake and don't balance it out with other values, things tend to get worse, not better. And people who genuinely care and are pursuing their passions together actually create better results much of the time than you do with an efficiency first plan. That doesn't mean there's no place for efficiency, but it means that the people who are actually doing the work and care about the results should be the ones deciding when to make processes more efficient and when not. So that's something else to learn, is that an efficiency third mindset will often be better for everyone than an efficiency first mindset. So that's another thing. And I guess the final thing that I'll mention is the concept of duocracy. And this is basic to Burning Man. It was actually a Cacophony Society thing as well. The idea that the people making the decisions should be the people doing the work. And that is so removed from what is mostly happening right now in our society and in our organizational structures. Decisions are made by people who are really removed from the work itself that is being done. And it turns out that is not only deeply alienating to, a whole bunch of people, but it creates all kinds of problems because, of course, the people making the decisions are as far away as they can possibly be from the actual work getting done. So there's an information problem there as well. Duocracy, the people who are doing the work get to make the decisions about it, is a really useful model for ways in which we can make communities better. And there's some other stuff. I have a leadership model in the book that I think is really, really useful for these kinds of things. But those things I think are the sort of the top level points of, okay, if we want to know what Burning Man has to offer communities and culture, that's a really great place to start.
That's amazing. I really enjoyed all those points, and I think they're really powerful. I didn't expect the efficient one, but the way that you phrase it, it seems to make sense. And it seems like, we are really in a society that is, efficient. We need to be efficient in some way, but it does impede other aspects. And I really like the idea of the intrinsic motivation. And it's funny because you're putting it in a much more intelligent way that I put it, but I use the analogy. It's like when you're connecting to, let's say people are looking for their life purpose or meaning, or what do I want to do? And I just use the analogy of just being a beaver. If you were made a beaver and you were trying to be a duck or a squirrel or a deer, you're going to be a terrible deer, and you're not going to enjoy your life. And that's kind of like how we're doing it these days. We need to figure out money so we can survive. So we're doing these tasks. We're showing up and doing tasks for money so that we can be indoors. But that's not fulfilling. That's not us being ourselves. But when we connect to who we are, no matter how unique, no matter how peculiar, no matter what that is, and we do that to the best of our abilities, then we become, as a part of the environment. The beaver is doing its thing. Nobody knows why it wants to chop down the tree and do that, but it loves doing that, and it's fulfilled and it's happy. And when it does that, it supports the entire forest by being itself. And I think, like, the way that we experience life, that it does help the whole, because we as individuals are inspired, we're happy, and most importantly, it's your life, it's your opportunity. And one of the things that I've learned from traveling and from doing so many podcasts and training with all of these different masters, from Shaolin monks to, training with a Native American elder, to talking to people who are successful in business, but also fulfilled. And it's the idea to just ask yourself and start with those basic questions.
Right.
What do you want to do?
Right.
And you're not going to know how to do it. Nobody who got there knew how to do it. They just kept asking, and they took a step. They took action. Then they took action again, and then they failed. And because that's a part of it. And you go better and better, and you keep going. But eventually you get to the place that inspires you. But if you don't ask that initial question, there is no opportunity for you to achieve that. And it's going to be up to you how you feel about navigating your life that way. Is that the way that you want to do it? That's your opportunity, and you can do that. And you can also do this way. There is nothing preventing you, and there's nothing holding you back from achieving that success or redefining your values and the way you live your life and what's most important to you. You can do that. That's available to you also. So you made a lot of great points. I would love for you, actually, I was going to ask a different question, but I would love for you to share a little bit about leadership too, if you want to just touch on that a little bit, because leadership is so important, and in organizations, in the way that we conduct business, even leadership in the family. So there's a lot of ways that we can apply leadership principles. So maybe you can touch on that just a little bit.
Sure. So it's interesting because one of the questions the Burning Man organization is most often asked is for leadership advice. And I think that one of the things we see emerging out of Burning Man culture is a whole different kind of model of leadership, right? I think that conventional notions of leadership do not do very well in Burning Man spaces and Burning Man culture, and that you see a whole different model of leadership emerging, and I don't think this has been adequately looked at. And I think this is one of the things that I'm most proud of the book for offering. And to sort of summarize, I mean, what's the problem with the ordinary model of leadership, the conventional model of leadership? Well, who are the leaders? If you ask that question of most organizations, what you'll find is that there are two different kinds of people who are leaders. One of which is the funder, the person who's providing the money. They're in charge, they make the decisions. And the other is the person who has the administrative power, right? They're also the decision maker in the sense that they decide where resources are allocated and draw up shift schedules, and they control the bureaucracy, right? Those are the two things. Neither of those really work in Burning Man culture. The first one doesn't work because Burning Man culture prides itself on having decommodified spaces. It's not that money is bad. It's not saying, oh, money evil, none of that. I mean, obviously people spend a lot of money to prepare for Burning Man, but when you are in the space itself, you can't buy anything. Nothing is for sale. Money does not mediate how you interact with other people. This is so important. It's something that is really misunderstood about decommodification. Decommodification as a Burning Man principle isn't saying, oh, money bad, terrible. I mean, maybe you think it is, and you can have your opinion on that, sure. But what it means in practice in Burning Man is we do not mediate our interactions with one another through money or through what would be considered money substitutes. status, or I mean, you were talking earlier about how you meet these people at Burning Man and you have no idea who they are, and or where they come from, and they're different from the ordinary people you meet. That's what it's like when you don't use money and status as mediators for how we interact with one another. When you take those things off the table, you get a much more human encounter with one another. So saying I have the money, I provided the resources, therefore I'm the leader, that doesn't work. That's the essence of commodification, right? That's, so that isn't going to work for Burning Man spaces. In fact, Burning Man spaces as gifting spaces are very specifically that, no, you don't hoard resources over other people. Everyone tries to be as self-reliant as possible. And then if you want to offer gifts, you offer gifts. But that's not, I have resources, so I'm in charge. So that is to be taken off the table. Then you have, well, I control bureaucratic power, so I'm the leader. That's what happens. Again, not going to work for Burning Man culture, because Burning Man culture is about finding your intrinsic motivation and doing your thing, and about being self-reliant about it. So, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but a guy going, well, I've got a title, so I'm in charge. You have to do what I say. No, that's not going to work. I'm intrinsically motivated. I want to do my thing. You can do your thing. If you want to help with my thing, great. Maybe I'll help you with your thing, but I don't belong to you. You're not going to boss me around. I'm trying to be helpful. That's different from being subordinate. So those two things don't work. Those just don't work. So what would work? I mean, people often try to say, well, what if you're a visionary? You have the vision, and you're the visionary, so you're in charge. That also doesn't work, because while sure, people have visions and people try to be helpful with it, again, applied existentialism. Find your own vision. What do you want to do? What do you care about? And if what you really care about is this project that this other person is doing, well, great, you can do that. But you're not there because they're their leader. You're there because you want to help. You're there because of your passion as well. So this notion that, well, maybe it's the visionary who's the leader. No, not working. So, okay, so we have this situation where the conventional models of leadership don't apply at Burning Man. You've been going for 5 times. Have you ever been in a situation where you're like, well, that person's got the resources, so I got to do what they tell me, or that person has a title, so I guess no. I mean, if you decide you want to do that, okay, but they're not in charge that way. So it's just not how it works out there. So how does it work? So I approach this, and I work with some other people in the organization. We approach this by saying, okay, well, much in the same way that Larry established the 10 principles by asking what's actually happening, let's actually pay attention. What's going on? How does it work? We found that there are qualities that people who are volunteering for Burning Man, we didn't start with the leaders. We started with the people doing the work. Again, duocracy, right? Start with the work. When the system is working, what experience are they having? What's actually going on? And we found that people who are volunteering at Burning Man, helping at Burning Man, have a series of qualities that they experience that every organization has, but that in most organizations, they're hoarded at the top, right? What am I talking about? I'm talking about relevance, the sense that the work you do is relevant. Let's be honest, most organizations, most people, most jobs, do you feel all that relevant? Do you go in thinking I'm really important? This is, what I do matters? No. And, but if you're at the top, maybe you do. But most jobs, let's be honest, have a sense of futility involved with them. You're doing it because you have to. People who are volunteering at Burning Man feel relevant. Another is agency. They're making decisions that matter to them, and they get to be able to do that. This involves not only what they're doing, and again, the whole idea is follow your own passion. So right there, you have agency. Are you passionate about this? Do you care? Great, then you should do it. If you don't, do what you were passionate about. But so people have agency. They're making decisions that are relevant to them and to themselves. And they often get to do things that they do in ways that are relevant to them and themselves. For example, how do you want to dress? How do you want to talk? What do you want to do? I mean, there are some things that we can't give people unlimited control over. Like, if you're working the box office or the accounting and you're handling money, okay, you can't come up with your own mathematical system for this. But if you want to do it in a tutu, sure, do that. If you get to make all these kinds of choices about how you do the things that you decide to do. So that's agency. Another is community, is competence. You get to do things to the extent that you are capable of doing them, which is actually kind of different from the way in which most jobs and agents and organizations work, right? If you go in and you see a process in most places and you say, I can do it better than this, I have a whole better approach, most places are going to be like, yeah, no, sorry, we're hiring you to do this specific thing. You do that, you do it the way we tell it to. Burning Man is full of opportunities by which you can say, no, I can do this better. I have another way to do it. And you have those opportunities. You get to take it. You get to work to the level of your capacities on the work you are doing. Nobody's going to tell you, do it worse. Don't try as hard as you want to try, which is actually a thing that happens a lot in most organizations, right? We're actually held back a lot. So, and there are a couple more. But the point is that you have these qualities. And every organization has them. There's somebody in every organization that has access to these, but they're usually hoarded right at the top, right? They're usually hoarded for the people in the C-suites, the senior executives. They're the people who get to feel like they have relevance and they have agency and they can work at their capacities. They're the people who feel that they are connected and they are establishing social capital and that it's meaningful. They're the ones who get it. Everybody else doesn't get access to these. At Burning Man, when we're doing it right, everybody feels like they have these qualities. Everybody has access to them. And what we think that means is that leadership in Burning Man is spreading these qualities around. The people who are leaders at Burning Man are the people who help other people feel relevant and help them access their agency and help them engage with their competence and all the other things, help them develop social capital, help them feel connected to the broader community. That's who leaders are. And that's not a zero-sum game. Everybody can be a leader if they are able to do that. You don't, just because one person is a leader doesn't mean another person is a leader. And it has nothing to do with allocation of resources. It has nothing to do with, who controls the levers of bureaucracy. The leaders are the people who help other people access these qualities and have these experiences. And if you are helping other people have these experiences, then you will be seen as a leader. That, in a nutshell, is the Burning Man leadership model as I proposed it.
That's amazing. I'm so glad I asked that. That's really well put. It reminds me, I just read Flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I'm probably pronouncing that terribly, but it talks about the conditions. It talks about the conditions for flow, and one of them is to be challenged, right? So when you want to be in flow, you can't be doing the thing that's super easy to you. You need to be challenged and be progressing that edge. And so everything that you shared there is really amazing because it also comes from experience. It isn't theory. Theory is all great. Philosophy is all great. But the fascinating thing about all of this stuff, it is philosophy from experience, which is the highest form because it's an observation, not saying this is the way it should be. It's like, or could be, this is what's being experienced. These are the positives. These are the negatives. So really amazing stuff. I wanted to ask, do you want to address any of the, I know there's a lot of negativity about Burning Man. Some people say now it's just the billionaires game, and you're going to hear more than I just kind of shut that down after the second year. I was like, yeah, there's baloney. I'm aware of that. I know this. I have eyes. I know. But my experience is not what you're saying. Like, I'm sure that is there. Right. That's not my personal experience. That's not what I'm experiencing, but I do know what you're talking about. Do you want to address that in any way, or do you want me to gloss over that?
No, we can absolutely talk about it. I mean, I'm all about having these honest conversations and seeing where they go. The most popular piece, I think the most helpful thing I ever wrote about Burning Man was the piece "It's Okay to be miserable" It's okay to be miserable at Burning Man. The most popular piece I ever wrote was a satirical history called "A Brief History of Who Ruined Burning Man." And the idea of the piece, you can look it up online, is that every year, somebody, sometimes multiple somebodies, ruined Burning Man. It was the sound camps and the DJs. It was the tech executives. It was the billionaires. It was the celebrities. And so, over the period of, I think at that point it was like 30 years or something like that. Over Burning Man's 30-year history, it had been ruined 35 times by. And there's this real sense of this, and you're right. There's all this criticism and often just flat out negativity about it, and sometimes there are serious issues, and a lot of the times it's overblown. And I think let's just start with the ways in which it's overblown. The fact that celebrities come to Burning Man, if you don't bump into them, you'd never know. they do not change your experience at all. It's, I have no idea. Somebody just suggested to me at lunch this afternoon that some celebrity was at Burning Man this year. Well, I don't know. Maybe they were. I hope they had a good time. It doesn't change anything. Similarly, the presence of most elite 1% billionaire types doesn't actually really change anything. It's, there are some bad actors, and we'll get to that. We'll talk about that. But for the most part, the fact that there's a lot of money flowing through Black Rock City at this point, yeah, again, doesn't really change your experience, or it actually contributes, because a lot of them are creating giant gifts that they are offering to people in a decommodified way, which is exactly what you'd want to do. I mean, that's it. It just, if incredibly rich people are at Burning Man, again, it doesn't really change the experience all that much. It doesn't have that much of an impact. That's seriously overblown. A lot of the reasons why people talk about this is because those are really easy media hooks for people, right? I mean, the internet loves, oh, celebrity so-and-so, photo of them at Burning Man. And then everybody goes, oh, what are they doing at Burning Man? Well, whatever. Similarly, oh, we get really mad at the rich for being at Burning Man. Well, okay, that's an easy headline, but if you talk to people who are actually there, most of the time it doesn't affect your experience at all. So those kinds of things are seriously overblown. Then there are some issues that are more serious, that I think are still problematic, but they are problematic. I think they're still overblown, but they are genuinely problematic. Let's take the notion of the increasing complexity and, well, let's take the notion that Burning Man is getting more and more expensive, that it has to be a playground for the rich because it's so expensive. This is broadly a misunderstanding of how Burning Man actually works. In the first place, it's expensive, but is it more expensive than anything else you'll be doing for a week? The face value of the average ticket is $450, for a week. That's not so bad. That's not out of line, frankly, with most of the things you're doing. And in fact, I'd say is better than most. Is the travel expensive? Well, yes, but what are you going to do about that? Is the gear expensive? Yeah, it can be. On the other hand, if you're doing it multiple years, then you don't have to buy all that much year after year. But more importantly, it misunderstands the notion of Burning Man as a community effort. Because I mentioned when I was talking about leadership, social capital, right? That's a thing, as opposed to fiscal capital. This is actually something I talk about a lot in the book. If you are going to Burning Man and you are not connecting to the community, then yeah, it's going to be a lot more expensive. You're going to buy everything yourself. You're going to take care of all of the details yourself. You're going to spend out all the money to go. It's going to be a lot of money. If, on the other hand, you are a member of the Burning Man community where you live, suddenly there's ride shares, and suddenly it's easier to find tickets, and suddenly people are going in together to send gear out there, and suddenly they're sharing resources on Playa. And so all of a sudden these expenses go down significantly because you are a part of a community. People who talk about the expense of Burning Man always overlook the fact that social capital counts for as much or more than fiscal capital when you are going out there. If you are an active member of the community, then it's not nearly as difficult to do, let alone nearly as expensive to do. So the price issue is a serious one, and I'm glad that Burning Man is doing more low price tickets to address that. But again, the tickets aren't really the expensive part. The expensive part is all the other stuff. I mean, you've been going 5 years. You know that. It's all the other stuff. The more you are doing this with other people, the more those costs go down, the more convenient it is. So for people who are engaged in the community, that is less of a problem. And that is something that really needs to be remembered when we talk about that particular kind of issue. And then you have an issue where, yeah, you have some genuine bad actors out there. I mean, let's not pretend that people are perfect. You have some people who really do just go out there to be absolute assholes, and that needs to be addressed The Burning Man Project, I think, has been getting better at addressing them, but it's an ongoing effort. And I think that the placement team is taking that a lot more seriously now. I think that they're looking very seriously at, all right, how are these people coming in? What can we do to make their trip in less convenient and therefore make the whole thing less appealing to them? Yeah, no, that's an issue, but I don't see it as an existential threat. This notion that, the fact that there are some assholes, sometimes rich assholes at Burning Man, they're tearing the whole thing down. Oh, come on, that's we're talking about a global community here, and a central event of almost 80,000 people. That's that is again an overblown threat. The question of whether or not they get more and more influence, that's also a serious one. And we're watching the organization, we're watching the Burning Man Project to make sure that they stay true to form. That people, it's ultimately a commodification question. Can people buy influence? And absolutely, we need to stay on top of the organization and make sure that that does not happen. I mean, I can tell you that there are some very, very committed people in this building to making sure that that does not happen. Nevertheless, money is slippery, and so yeah, we have to be vigilant about that. But again, that is a manageable problem. As long as we are honest, then we're okay.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all that. And it's interesting because a lot of the time when I'm traveling or I'll talk about Burning Man, people who haven't experienced it, they immediately go to the negative. They go to kind of one of those three headlines that you shared. And overall, I would say that that's the minority. That is just going to be the little bit apart. And it, like you said, it's a lot more overblown than, people make it out to be. But for whatever reason, people want to address that and kind of disregard the 95% of all of the magic and what it is, and allowing that space for anybody to come and to express themselves, and all the amazing points and all the great that it does. And I am personally super stoked on Burning Man, and I've seen so many powerful experiences and heard, story after story after story of just people having huge breakthroughs there and in their life. And whether it was like, you go to therapy to heal trauma. A lot of time when people will hear the trauma just through engaging with the community, they'll think about the way that they operate. They'll change their perspective on how they deal with everyday life outside of there. They'll make lifelong friends that are actually supportive. There's so much magic and goodness about Burning Man. And I think that is the majority. Just like anything else, if you're going to bring 70,000 people together, there is going to be some crap, and you can focus on it all day if you wish, and that's up to you. So I appreciate you addressing that. I want to be mindful of your time, but I definitely wanted to ask you, one kind of thought experiment question. Where do you see the possibility of Burning Man? Let's say you can change the timeline if you want, 10, 20 years. If you want to get crazy, you can give me 100 years. But where do you see the possibility of what Burning Man could be inside Black Rock City, but also the influence outside Black Rock City? If you could, again, you don't have to be a blueprint, but just kind of like steer it in a way where you're like, this could be the highest vision of what could be possible.
Right. No, the highest vision of what could be possible for Burning Man is absolutely outside of Black Rock City. Black Rock City is amazing. It's incredible, but it is no longer where Burning Man has to happen. I think that in fact, let me go further and say that Burning Man has earned a place in history now. I mean, there's been an exhibit in the Smithsonian. There are exhibits in museums, around America. I mean, it's an international media. It's earned a place in history. But whether history will remember it as a boutique arts movement or a major social movement is still open to question. We don't know that yet. That depends on us. That depends on what we do. And that question will not be settled in Black Rock City. That question will be settled out in the world. If Burning Man has a significant influence on the world, it's a major social movement. If Burning Man basically retains its influence in Black Rock City, it's a boutique arts movement. And so that question is open. That has to be decided. What is Burning Man's highest future in this sense? Honestly, it's to become obsolete. It's for the ideas of Burning Man. It's for the philosophy of Burning Man. It's for the culture of Burning Man to so permeate the world that people don't need to do Burning Man anymore because they're doing it themselves. The 10 principles are not copyrighted. You don't have to become a Burning Man affiliate to have radical self-expression or immediacy or radical inclusion. One of the things I talk about in my book is that Burning Man isn't that. I talked much earlier in our conversation about one of the things that separates Burning Man out from, music festivals and things, and that part of it's that it has a philosophy. But there's something even more basic, which is that the message of a music festival like Coachella or Woodstock is you had to be there to experience it. The message of Burning Man culture is I can do this myself. The more people do it themselves, the better the world is going to become. The more like Burning Man the world is going to become. And what that means is you create a space. There's no intrinsic magic to going out to the desert and creating Black Rock City. You create a space. You take it outside of commerce. You let people interact with one another in creative ways, find their intrinsic motivations. You ask, how can I help? You don't mediate your interactions to the extent possible with money and status. You create art. The more people do that, the more people learn to create spaces like that and grow spaces like that where they live, the more they don't need Burning Man. In the ideal world, Burning Man as a movement makes Burning Man as an organization obsolete. It makes Burning Man as a thing that people do as a name recognition thing obsolete because it's just the way the world works. That's the highest good of Burning Man. That's the ideal future of Burning Man. That's what I'm working towards.
Amazing. Beautiful, beautiful answer. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing in your book and, everything that you're doing. I want to ask you before we close it down, is there anything that you wish that I had asked or anything else that you want to address?
No, I've really enjoyed this. I think the most important thing that people need to remember is to keep it fun. We've talked about a lot of heady things here. We've talked about philosophical things, but find your passion in all this. That's the crucial thing. And if this is not your passion, that's okay. Nobody has to do Burning Man, but we'd like to help. But it should be fun. You should be laughing. If you're not laughing in a way that connects you to other people, there's something probably going wrong. We might be able to help with that. But that's what I would say. Is it should be personal. It should be fun. It should be engaging, and everything else can work itself out.
Beautiful. Very, very well said. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation. I always enjoy talking about Burning Man and the experiences we could do. Probably 20 episodes on just, one of my beautiful experiences and one of your beautiful experiences, or whatever we're going to do. And I like the last bit about having fun and there's a lot of hard work that goes there, the storms and the heat, and it's just friggin' terrible in so many different ways, but you're usually wearing something ridiculous and somebody else's, and you're doing hard work, but you're bringing it with a light perspective, and you're doing it for other people, and that gives a lot of purpose. It gives a lot of meaning, and it's wonderful. It's a very amazing experience. So thank you for the book, and I invite people to check out your website, your book. Where can people find more about you in the book and pick it up and dive deep?
The book is available anywhere. The Scene That Became Cities, or for the author, Caveat Magister. I love it when people get it through local bookstores. That's fantastic, but it's also available at Amazon or major retailers. I'm on Burning Man's journal frequently. I publish there a lot. That's journal.burningman.org, or again, just look up Caveat Magister online. If you want to get on the equivalent of my email list, I have a Patreon, patreon.com. That's Benjamin Wax, Benjamin WACHS. All my work goes there, including a lot of things that have nothing to do with Burning Man. But that's where I am on the internet.
Awesome. Cool. Well, everybody check out the book, support Benjamin, support Caveat. Thank you so much for your time and just sharing everything you did today. Appreciate it.
This has been great. Thank you.
Awesome. See you guys. See you in the next one. Peace.